Hey guys, this is Echo Soundworks with ADSR. In this video, we'll be taking a look at the anatomy of a clap sample, both acoustic and electronic. So I've done a couple other videos in this series where we've looked at the anatomy of certain types of samples. There's one on 808s, there's one on kick drums, and there's even one on snares. So I thought I would expand on that and do one about claps because claps are pretty interesting and unique. There's a good amount of sound design trickery that has to go into making a synthesized or electronic clap sound like a clap to our human ears, right? So I'm hoping by the end of the video, you guys feel more confident in your ability to select the perfect clap for your track, for your beat. And I also want you guys to feel confident enough because of the understanding of what makes a clap sample a clap sample. I want you to feel confident enough to get in there and do some surgery and do some vector synthesis and say, hey, I really like the transient of this clap. What happens if I combine it with the tail of this one? So let's open up Ableton and open up the ADSR sample manager and just dive right in. All right, so there are two broad categories of clap sounds. There's the acoustic natural clap, which is just a human clapping, right? And then there is the electronic synthesized clap. Now that could be from a drum machine like a TR808 909, or it could be a more modern synthesizer like Serum or Massive or whatever it might be, right? So in this video, we're going to be primarily looking at the latter of those. We're going to be looking at these synthesized electronic claps. Because most sample packs that you get and clap samples you have are probably created from like a TR808 909 type synth, and then maybe layered with, some type of Foley sound or a human clap, using some type of vector synthesis technique. So let's quickly though run over a human clap because it's kind of an interesting, there's an interesting phenomenon that goes on with that. If I just were to record a single clap, depending on where I hit my hand and how I do it, it may not sound like a clap, especially in a dense mix. Most of the time when you're producing and you want like a natural human clap, you actually layer multiple claps together. It's almost never just one unless you have like a background like kind of like a syncopated offbeat type clap. So here's a clap that I recorded in before I filmed this video. It's actually 3 or 4 claps I just layered together, stuck a little bit of reverb on, and it sounds like this. Right? It sounds like a pretty human clap. So why am I pointing this out? Well, a couple things. First, if you are producing a track and you want like a nice human clap sound, layer it. It's going to sound better. It's going to sound definitely bigger. It's going to sit in the mix usually a bit better. And it sounds more like a clap. There's this phenomenon, I think, with humans that when we think of a clap sound, usually when we're clapping, it's not many of us just sit in a room by ourselves just clapping, right? Like it's always with other people clapping. And so I think we're kind of tuned to hear multiple claps or multiple sources creating what we think of as a clapping sound. So from that perspective, it becomes really important we start to look at synthesized claps. So let's just go to the most iconic synthesized clap of all time. Arguably, it's the 808 or the 809 clap, right? Well, here is the 808 clap loaded up in Ableton's drum rack. Right? Now, it's interesting to note that this is actually kind of multiple sounds making up that one sound, just like what I just mentioned, that humans kind of think of a clap as multiple sound sources, not just one clap. So now we've covered that pretty much every clap is going to be multiple sound sources bundled into one sample, one sound. Let's start to look at a few different claps so we can get an idea of how they differ and how they create a different sound. So I'm going to pull up the ADSR sample manager for this, and I've already done a search off video for a clap, and I'm in one of my folders, one of our sound pack folders that have a bunch of different claps organized by genre. So for instance, I'm doing this at complete random. Let's go and find, here's some modern hip hop clap, like a trap clap. Let's take a listen. Right, all of them sound unique and different. And let's go and listen to some house claps now. Again, everything's different. We just listened to probably 10 or 15 different claps. But one thing that will remain the same in all of these claps, even though they sound a little bit different, is the anatomy of that clap. It's how it's put together and what's going on. And how you tweak that recipe will determine what type of clap it is and how it sounds. So for instance, if you're going for a really tight clap, if you're not trusting your ears, or you're not, maybe you're like, oh, I've dragged in like 5 claps and I can't find a good one. Use your eyes, look at the sample. After you watch this video, it'll be a lot easier to just use your eyes and be like, oh yeah, this is a tight clap. This is kind of the clap I'm looking for. Or maybe you like the body of a clap, but you don't like the initial transient attack phase. You can just keep the body and make your own. You'll be able to do that after watching the next few minutes of this video. So if I zoom in on, let's go to more of a classic kind of house clap. There we go. All right, so let's zoom in on this audio here in the sample manager. You'll notice that we have two distinct sections. We have the transient section and then the body section. Now the transient section in any given clap could be one transient, two, three, sometimes four. And the space at which the transients occur, like how much time elapses before the first transient to the second transient, has a lot of impact on how we perceive the clap. Like a very tight clap is maybe going to have two transients that are fairly close together. A more loose clap, here I'll save this one. This is clap 03. Let's go down to one of those loose claps from the house section. Look how spread out these are, right? See the difference between this small clap, that one right there, and this one? I mean, there's a lot of space between the start and the transient and then the body of the clap, right? So that's the general anatomy or recipe is you're going to have a stage or series of transients and then the body. Now the body is usually some type of noise. If you're thinking about this from a synthesized drum perspective, like a 909 or an 808, usually white noise with some type of oscillator, usually a triangle waveform, going into a bandpass filter. That's kind of the basic recipe for creating a clap. Now, obviously, you need to have those initial transients as well as that controlled white noise part with an envelope that decays correctly, right? So if we just zoom in on this clap here, and we start this clap after the transients, check it out. Right? It doesn't even sound like a clap anymore. It just sounds like kind of a white noise hit. Now, let's take this back and let's change our endpoint now. So we're just hearing, I'll zoom back in. So we're just hearing those transients, right? Right? If you put that in a production or song, it's just going to, most people, or producers definitely will be like, oh, it's some type of percussive hit, right? It's a Foley sound. It's not a clap. So it is the combination of these two elements. All right, so I pulled in a couple claps here and I've sliced them up in their different sections so you can see very clearly what's going on. So here is a future bass clap. All right, so I color coded it so you can see here. We have transient 1, transient 2, transient 3, and then the body. So let's just listen to the first transient. So let's mute everything else and just listen to the transient. Right, it sounds like just like a modular blip. It's very hard to hear. It's very high pitched. Now let's listen to the second transient. So a little less high in pitch, you can start to hear more of the body of the tone. So let's listen to the third transient now. Right, so it went up in pitch a little bit from the third one. Now, it's interesting to point out that each of these are basically a different pitch. So if we play this, right, we have 3 different pitches. Now, it's such a high pitch, it's very hard for our ears to really, be like, oh yeah, there's a pitch there. But this plays into the idea, I think, why this works so well with samples, and this is just my own perspective from my, being a sound designer, is that when you clap your hand, depending on where you hit your hand, how big a hand you have, where, you position each hand, whether it's the hand that's the static hand that you're hitting or the one that's doing the hitting, it will have a different pitch, right? Listen. You can get so many different tones from a clap. So I think this idea of having the transients different pitches does help, right? So let's go into the clip view here and we'll actually just transpose these. So let me turn on, undo, we'll turn on warp for this. And we'll turn each of these down a couple semitones and just turn this one up. This will change the whole feeling of this clap. All right, so now that we've covered the basic anatomy of the transient, the attack section of a clap, let's move on to the body/tail. So if we go back to the iconic 808 clap here, we can see that if we move our start position, just play this clap, it's basically white noise with a bandpass filter and an envelope at its basic level, right? And it just tails out. Now, if we go back to our future bass clap up here, Same idea applies. It's some type of noise. This is more of a bright noise as opposed to a classic white noise, and this has a little bit of reverb glued in the sample, and also a layered sound. And that could be a Foley sound. It could be a metallic sound. It could be anything. So you can get creative if you're trying to like tweak and create your own snares or make a snare sample that you like more interesting. For instance, let's say you're making a house banger and you have that classic house clap in there, and it's like, it's a little boring. You can try applying some type of layered sound to the tail or the body. Just make sure that it mirrors in terms of its decay rate, the decay of that clap, so that it glues together and fits together nicely. But that's the general construct of all claps. We have the attack and transient section, which is usually multiple small transients, and then that evolves into and progresses into the body and the tail. So let's look at a very different clap. Let's look at what's called a loose clap. You hear this a lot in house, as well as even old school hip hop. All right, so it looks like this. It's going to look a lot different than our last clap we were looking at, right? We have multiple transients, and even the body is quite spaced out, but it's going to give this kind of lazy, loose feel. So again, you'll notice the same pattern, transients, and then here's our body. All right, so how does all this apply to music production? Well, let's say you're working on a track and you're having a hard time finding the right clap. You can just quickly think, well, do I need one that's looser or tighter? Do I need one that has a longer tail? The body needs to be more sustained, or what do I want, right? And if we go back to the sample manager here, you can use your eyes actually to see a lot of this information. So let's say you want kind of like a really tight clap. This one right here isn't going to be super tight because I can see right away that there's a good amount of space in between the transient and the body, right? So if you're going for a tight clap, that's not the one. But let's say you really like that clap. Well, what you could actually do, now that you understand the makeup of a clap, we'll go into one of our tracks here and delete the clap that's already there. And we'll drag this one out and in. So now that you have an understanding of the anatomy of a clap sample, well, now you can go, well, this one's too spaced out, but I like how it sounds. What can you do? Well, you can actually just go and start to perform clap surgery. So we're just going to take this section right here and hit Command E to trim. And now I'm just going to take this, shorten it, space, do a little bit of a fade just to avoid popping or clicking, and then get this at a start, preferably a zero crossing. So we'll do it right there of the body or the tail. And now what we can do is we can bring this back towards the first part that we just basically smushed in. All right, so let's A/B these real quick. Here's the edited sample, the tighter version. And here's the sample from the ADSR sample manager. Right, so that's why I like doing these anatomy of videos. It gives you guys the power to edit the samples that you have to make them fit perfectly, so you don't just have to hopefully find the perfect sample, listen to 50 claps before like, that's the one. If you find one where you like the body, you can actually make it work typically by just tweaking the attack, the transient section to fit the sound you're going for. All right, guys, that's going to sum up the video. If you have any questions or comments, post those below, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. If you guys aren't subscribed to the ADSR channel, you know the drill. Hit subscribe. You don't want to miss out on these great videos. And if you do subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get an update when we release a new video. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm Echo Soundworks. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.